Hi, it's Aviva. Before we begin, a brief note. My conversation with Chief Rabbi Mirvis was recorded before the horrific attack on a Hanukkah celebration in Sydney, Australia. This year, Hanukkah is not the celebration that it should be. Jews around the world are feeling fear and anger, asking whether it's safe to be visible, to light candles, and to gather publicly. I asked the Chief Rabbi to come back and share a few words in response to the attack before we play our full conversation. Our hearts are with the Jewish community in Australia and with the victims and their families. Chief Rabbi, so many Jews are feeling angry and afraid. What have been your reflections since the attack?
You know, Hanukkah is a festival of light, and so far we have endured so much darkness. And I'm actually receiving an enormous amount of inspiration from Australian Jewry. They have endured so much in recent times. And their response to Bondi Beach is similar to our response in the UK to the terrorist attack on Yom Kippur on Heaton Park Synagogue. Obviously, the scale is very much different. But what we were saying straight after Yom Kippur was, we are shocked, but we're not surprised. And that's what I'm hearing from Australia. Shocked, it's terrible, it's awful, the scenes are absolutely abysmal. But there isn't surprise because we have all been aware of the tone of hatred which exists on the streets of our cities, which is allowed to go by unchecked. And therefore, it was only a question of time when hate speech would be translated into hate action.
I agree with you. It just felt inevitable. After all these years of words of hate and genocidal rhetoric turning into acts of arson and vandalism and harassment of Jews, it was inevitable that it was going to only get more violent and ultimately cost Jewish lives. How do we find in this moment a faith to help us navigate through the darkness?
I was watching a scene live from Bondi Beach earlier today. It was the second candle of Hanukkah being lit at Bondi Beach, alongside the thousands of floral tributes which have been laid there. Far more people there on second night than on first night. And they were singing together so beautifully the words of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, which he composed in the 18th century. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od v'ha'ikar lo lefachet klal. The whole wide world is a very narrow bridge. And the most important thing for us to remember is we will not be afraid. And that's what's happening. You know, we recognize how delicately poised life right now is. But lo lefachet, we're deeply concerned. We are very worried, not just about our Jewish communities. We're worried about the values of our entire civilization, because this is not only a Jewish problem, it's a societal problem. But together with that, we are resilient, we're strong. I know in the UK, we're going to come out in large numbers to Hanukkah celebrations this week, other places in the world. Nothing is going to keep us away. We are here in Maccabee style, determined to celebrate our faith in public spaces. We will rejoice during this Hanukkah, but with very, very deep pain in our hearts.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. And now to our full conversation. Today is Tuesday, December 16th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompus. Across the Jewish world, families have gathered to light candles and retell a story more than 2,000 years old. The story of a small people who refused to surrender and who fought for the right to live and worship freely. The message of Hanukkah feels especially resonant this year. Since October 7th, we've witnessed remarkable displays of Jewish courage, from Israel's soldiers on the front lines of war, to students who stood their ground on hostile campuses, to the people who defended Israel and Jewish life, knowing they would pay a personal price. Hanukkah reminds us that Jewish resilience is ancient, and it pushes us to consider how we can hold on to hope when the world feels so uncertain. I'm deeply honored to welcome back to the podcast Chief Rabbi Sir Ephraim Mirvis. The Chief Rabbi is the religious figurehead for Jewish communities across the Commonwealth of Nations and is internationally recognized for his leadership in education, interfaith dialogue, and social responsibility. He was made a Knight Commander of the British Empire by His Majesty the King in 2023. The Chief Rabbi joins us to talk about the meaning and messages of Hanukkah. Let's get into it. Chief Rabbi, welcome back to Boundless Insights.
Lovely to be with you, Aviva.
I am literally thrilled to have you back. A repeat.
Well, likewise.
Well, thank you. We're here to talk about Hanukkah, and it has been an entire year since we celebrated it. So for people who might need the refresher course, can you remind us of the story of Hanukkah and what it means to Jewish people around the world?
Well, Hanukkah is a most wonderful celebration of the Jewish people, yet another festival on our calendar in which we celebrate Jewish survival. And our minds are cast back to the 2nd century before the Common Era, when there was an attempt to Hellenize the Jewish people. An idol of Zeus was placed in our temple. Jews were forced to adopt an Hellenistic style of life. We were forbidden from carrying out our regular Jewish practices. The Jewish people did not allow that to happen. Under the leadership of Judah the Maccabee, we staged a most heroic battle against the Greeks. We overcame that threat. We arrived back in our temple, ready to purify it. There was some oil available, but it would only last us for one day. It was going to take 8 whole days to prepare some fresh oil, and a miracle happened. That oil, which had the potential just for one day, lasted for 8 days. Hence, the miracle of the 8 days of Hanukkah and our celebration over 8 days.
That was perhaps the best and most beautiful, very short, but very sweet recap of Hanukkah. What always strikes me about this holiday is where people put the emphasis. Some people put the emphasis on Jewish courage, the bravery of the Maccabees to fight, and some put the emphasis on the divine, on the miracle of those lights. And I wonder in the modern context how you think about that balance of reliance between what we are willing to take on, the action and courage we'll assume, versus relying on God.
Aviva, I thought you were going to talk about emphasis on food, on donuts.
I'm going to get to your favorite donut flavor soon.
We've left that to the side because we certainly shouldn't be prioritizing that. And you've asked a great question. In our tradition, we find a synthesis between what we call hishtadlut and bitachon. Hishtadlut is our own efforts, and bitachon is our trust in Almighty God. And we always seek to have a partnership of the two. You might recall in the book of Exodus, when the Israelites were caught between the Egyptians who sought to destroy us and the deep blue sea, Moses prostrated himself on the ground, prayed to God, and God said, "Ma titzak elai, why are you crying out to me? This is not a time to call for miracles from me. This is a time for action." It's the one occasion in which a prayer was refused straightforward by God. Moses got up, shared the information with the people. Nachshon said, "Okay, I'm going to lead," dived into the waters of the sea. They then parted, and there we see the combination of efforts together with God's intervention. And ever since that time, that is our recipe. And we've seen it being played out over the last 2+ years, when the heroic and valiant soldiers of Tzva Haganah Yisrael, together with the support of all of Am Yisrael, have engaged in heroic efforts, and Almighty God has performed his miracles, and together, that's how we come through.
I think about the courage of those soldiers all the time because it is remarkable, and because now we're reading about the degree to which they have PTSD and the enormous cost that it's bearing on them personally, on their families, on the economy of Israel. But I also think about the acts of Jewish courage from all over the world. And in 2025, to be openly Jewish can feel like an act of courage. If a young Jew came to you and said to you, "It feels really hard right now to be proud as a Jewish person," what would you tell him or her?
I don't think of courage when it comes to displaying our Judaism as just a natural thing to do. And it's also natural, or should be, to feel proud of being Jewish and to feel proud of the achievements of the State of Israel. Our feelings of pride or of shame are a direct consequence of information plus emotion. So how we feel about something is inspired by our knowledge of the situation. And so very often today we are finding people who genuinely, and it comes out of the goodness of their hearts, They're feeling disappointed, they're feeling let down, they're even feeling ashamed about events which have been taking place or certain stances of Am Yisrael at this time. But a large part of that is due to them being ill-informed. So therefore, I think that we all have a responsibility to know what the truth is, to familiarize ourselves with the real facts of the history of the last 100 years, and especially the history of the State of Israel and current events. And then, in general, we should all stand tall and be genuinely proud. There are some elements of what is happening in Israel over which sometimes one might not feel particularly proud. I'll give you one example of something that I'm not proud of. It's settler violence. It's when some settlers take the law into their own hands and they unlawfully attack innocent Palestinians in the territories. And that is exacerbated when it is carried out in the name of religion. That's certainly something I'm not proud of, and I believe it needs to be called out. But in general, we can indeed stand tall, and we should, because once we know the facts, we've got everything to be proud of.
I appreciate so much you saying that. Last week, I was at a conference in New Orleans with about 200 mayors and municipal leaders from across North America. We were talking about anti-Semitism, and the question that they had over and over again, and they're for the most part not Jewish leaders of cities, is how do you find that balance between they want to speak out against anti-Semitism, but they feel like they're in a catch-22. No matter what they say, they're going to get in trouble. And if they stay silent, they're going to get in trouble. And there's a lot of people that are unhappy about actions of the Israeli government or the Israeli military. And they're trying to figure out in a time when it feels like everybody is attacking us, how do you not pile on? How do you try to weave and find that balance between speaking out and holding your values versus recognizing that we're hypersensitive because of the amount of criticism that's falling on our heads?
Well, I think as a general rule for me, seeing as tragically there are so many people who are against us, and it's just the reality of the situation, why do we need Jewish people as well to be criticizing the state of Israel at this time? And whenever Jewish people go all out to criticize the state of Israel, it is taken full advantage of by our enemies. Of course, there are constructive ways in which we can contribute to improving the situation in Israel, or whatever it is that one feels strongly about. The best way for this is to live in Israel, to be part of a democratic state, and to express one's views. And indeed, it is within Israel that you find a full expression of views and opinions in a very strong way.
Extra full. Yeah, extra full.
Absolutely.
So on a similar note, our community is so deeply divided. We see that in Israel, certainly, and so much of what was about October 7th or what became about the hostages has turned into anti-government protests, and now there's the whole issue of whether or not Prime Minister Netanyahu should get a pardon. But also across the Jewish world, we're just deeply polarized, and we disagree on, it seems like, everything. And you and I might get to the disagreement over donuts shortly. But in this time of depolarization and division, which so troubles me, and I have to think must deeply trouble you, how do we find that balance between passionate disagreement on the issues and a sense of shared destiny or shared responsibility?
This comes right to the heart of what it is to be Jewish. We champion arguments. However, we identify between what we call a machloket l'shem shamayim and a machloket shelo l'shem shamayim. A machloket l'shem shamayim, an argument for the sake of heaven, is when I'm not there for the sake of my ego, but rather I deeply believe in a particular value and in articulating it, and I also respect other people for the beliefs and opinions that they hold. And as much as I want to speak, I also need to learn how to listen. And once we all have the capacity to do that, then we can contribute our feelings towards what ultimately will become a harmonious people. It was Chief Rabbi Cook who said, we as a people don't believe in uniformity, where we look the same, speak the same, have the same views. That's not a Jewish value. We believe in unity, which is very much like a symphony orchestra, where each instrument makes its own unique sound, and under the baton of the conductor, the sounds blend together to produce harmony. That's what we should seek to establish. I am deeply disturbed by the return of disharmony to Am Yisrael. We saw it in the lead up to the 7th of October. We now know for certain that our enemies took full advantage of it because they know that when we are disunited, we are at our weakest. And now that, thank God, there is a ceasefire, and thank God our hostages are home except for the last dead hostage, please God that they come home soon, we should now be having unity and celebrating what we have in common and celebrating that shared destiny and coming into Hanukkah as one absolutely united people engaging in the machloket l'shem shamayim, arguments for the sake of heaven. But sadly, that is just not the case.
No, it feels like we're missing Jewish joy. I feel the same way.
Yes, because there's an absence of joy when we are unnecessarily divided.
Well, I don't want to move into controversial questions, but I am now going to ask you about your favorite Hanukkah foods. So are you a latke person or are you a sufganiyot, a donuts person?
Oh gosh, I'm an everything person.
That is the best answer.
And it's just not good at this time. It's not great.
And how do you feel about traditional sufganiyot jelly donuts, so the white powdered ones with the jelly inside, versus these new gourmet ones that have appeared in recent years that have all sorts of flavors and delicacies?
Well, now that you're pressing me on this most important of subjects, I have a personal view which is quite unpopular. I don't like jam in donuts.
Whoa.
It spoils the donut for me. What do you think of that?
I have a proposition, because I've given this thought, a lot of thought actually, which is the ratio of the traditional jelly donut is off. And I propose that if we were to make it, I'm not sure what it's called in England. In Canada, it's a Timbit, a very small donut. In America, it's a munchkin. For a very small donut with a small amount of jelly inside, I think the ratio of dough to jelly would be better and people would be happier. I think it might bring harmony and peace to the Jewish people.
It might be more achievable than the lofty ideals of unity that we've been speaking about.
It's true. I want to pivot, if we could, and actually ask you about anti-Semitism. So tradition teaches us to place the Hanukkah in the window of our homes so that it is visible to the world. It's to publicize the miracle. But a lot of Jewish people, as you can understand, feel very afraid to show their Judaism, to display public symbols of Judaism. What do you say to people who are just too scared to do it this year?
Fascinatingly, the original and ideal way of kindling the Hanukkah is at the entrance to one's home. And you still find this in certain areas of Israel, and it's a beautiful thing to walk down the streets and to see it. And the idea is that as you walk into your home, you have the mezuzah on your right and your Hanukkah on the left. But then the Gemara says what happens bishat sakana, when in a time of danger people could act against us. Then the Gemara says the prime pirsum anissa, the publicizing of the miracle, is inside the home for the sake of the members of the family. Therefore, it is totally legitimate not even to have the candles at the window, but to have them, on a sideboard, on a table, within one's home for the sake of the family. If one particularly wants to place one's Hanukkah at the window, it's beautiful, it's lovely, and it's nice for people who are walking past to see. But in the event that one feels that it is dangerous, I think, as is the case in all situations, we should just exercise our common sense. Very sad as it is that some people feel this way at this time.
And how do you feel for people just in general that are struggling with showing their Jewish identity or showing their support for Israel? Do you have advice for them for how they can navigate it, where they might want to, but and maybe it's not a question of danger, maybe it's just a discomfort and they need a little bit of advice or guidance on how they can overcome it?
Well, this is central to the Hanukkah story because the Greeks placed idols on streets and forced Jewish people to prostrate themselves before those idols. And you have a story such as Hannah and her 7 sons, who were martyrs because they refused to do this. In public, they were absolutely determined to be proud of their Judaism and not to compromise on it. And I think that's a major message for us today. We have everything to be proud of. We need to stand tall with regard to our Judaism, Jews around the world, the Strait of Israel. In the event that there is genuine danger, then of course, let's exercise common sense and not do anything stupid. But I actually believe that this is a time for us not to allow the rest of the world to define us according to their perceptions of us. Let us define ourselves, knowing what the truth is about our value system, our Torah, and of what really has been happening in the Middle East. And let's stand tall and let the world know there are some people who know what the truth is, and we're proud of it.
Do you think that's what it means to be a modern-day Maccabee? Is there anybody or a group of people that you think of that are modern-day Maccabees?
Well, you see, it's interesting that you use the term Maccabee, because what's the origin of the term? It comes from the book of Exodus. Mi kamocha ba'elim Hashem. That's what it's an acronym for. Who is like you amongst the powerful ones, O Lord? So Maccabee actually is the fusion of the heroic, powerful, physical Jew together with our belief in God's greatness. And here again we find that fusion between our own efforts and our trust in Almighty God. And we're seeing some incredible Maccabees. For example, Hesder students, people who combine Torah study in yeshiva together with service in the Israeli army and other forms of combination of the two. I think this is the Jewish people at its very finest, where we are rooted in our values, true to the ways of our faith, and absolutely committed to show heroic courage in defending our state and our people.
So the last time that you came on Boundless Insights was just before Rosh Hashanah, and you had a very beautiful message about taking on a little bit more mitzvot. You told me the funniest joke, which I have continued to tell everywhere I go. If you were getting royalties for this joke, you would have a small fortune now. It was about who is frummer, Mr. Frum or his son, and you told me his son because he's a little frummer. And I still makes me giggle every time I think it. But I thought the message, especially, of asking each of us to think about one small thing that we can do is so beautiful. And I wonder if you have a similar message for Hanukkah.
So it was December, something like 35 to 40 years ago. And my wife Valerie and I were raising our children in Ireland at a time when I was Chief Rabbi of Ireland, and our children were attending a Montessori play school. And I came to collect my son Noam, who was then 2 years old, from school, and the teacher said, "We taught them all about the continents today. You will see, Noam knows all the continents." So later on at home, I tested him. I said, "Noam, I'll start off and you finish." "Oh, yes," he said. So I said, "All right, Afri," he said, "K." I said, "Yer," he said, "Rip." I said, "A," he said, "Je." I said, "Australia," he said, "Leah." And then I said, "Ameri," and he said, "Christmas." So what I realized then is that it's this time of the year, we're very much aware of what's happening around us. And even so, we need to be proud of our Jewish heritage. And we know it's Hanukkah time. It's not a time for anything else for us. And we are so blessed to have our festivals, our way of life, our Torah, which enhance our lives on a daily basis.
On that exact note, just before we wrap up, is there a place where you'd like to see the Jewish world add a little bit more light in the coming year?
Definitely. First of all, spirituality. I am witnessing a marvelous return to Jewish values. You know, the book of Exodus tells us, "Vayak asher ya'anu oto ken yirbeh v'chen yifrotz," the more Pharaoh and the Egyptians strove to oppress us. The larger and the stronger we became. That's what's happening to the Jewish people right now. It's an enormous silver lining of the dark clouds we've been experiencing. This is a time for us to invest in our spirituality, and Hanukkah is a marvelous occasion through which we can do that, to see the light of our Jewish tradition and our connection with God grow and develop. Second area is education. You know, the term Hanukkah comes from the same root as chinuch. Hanukkah means dedication, chinuch means education. And the two are linked together, because to have good Jewish education, you need dedication. You need to invest in it. But also, to be dedicated to a particular cause, you need education. You need to be properly informed. And that's one of the big problems we've got today. There are so many people who are passionately making a stand, but they've been ill-informed. They've been miseducated. And that's why it's so important to educate people about the truth and about the facts. And the last element of growing light, must be in the area of truth. There is so much falsehood which surrounds us, to the extent, if you take, for example, the claim, God forbid, that Israel is guilty of genocide, is just about becoming a norm. We should never accept that. We need to stand up and say to the world, you are wrong. What you believe in is based on outright lies. This is the truth. We're standing up for it, and we want the truth to succeed and to expand, just like those Hanukkah lights.
Thank you so much, Chief Rabbi.
Thank you, Aviva. Always a wonderful pleasure to speak to you. And congratulations to you for everything you're doing for our Jewish people and for our challenged world. You're amazing.
Thank you.